Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah, and I like to talk about books. Today, we're going to talk about the Goodreads Choice Awards for 2024. Just today, November 12th, the opening round of voting has started, and it goes through November 24th. I was just scrolling through and looking at the nominations, so I figured I'd hop on here and we could talk about it together. A few thoughts I have about the Goodreads Choice Awards that I think are worth mentioning. And the first is that I am consistently disappointed, but never really surprised at the way that these lists go. There are certain names that you're always going to see on this list. You've got your Emily Henrys, your Sally Rooney's, Lee Bardugo. Like, I fully expect to see all of those names on this list. At the same time, I tend to almost never see marginalized authors or indie authors on this list because this list tends to be books that publishing houses have put the most marketing dollars towards. Because they are marketed so heavily, more people pick them up and then more people end up voting on them, and that's kind of just how these things go year after year. Based off of what I have seen so far, it looks like this year may be marginally better than in prior years. Not good, in no way, shape, or form good, but maybe potentially marginally better. Maybe I'm just looking for a silver lining these days. I'm not entirely sure. Without further ado, let's go through these categories. A few things that they actually added this year. So I think they added last year that like Romantasy got its own category, which fine, that's fine. But they've also added categories for audiobooks, which I think is interesting. And I do think that like there are certain audiobook productions that truly like take a book and transform it into something even more magical. So I appreciate that they have an audiobook category. I think that's a good addition for this year. But I'm gonna go just in order of like how they have this on their site, starting with fiction. There are several books in here that I have seen and I have not read. Some that I have actually, I have not read a single book in this listing. But there's a lot of these books that are on my TBR, including Martyr, Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange, Sally Rooney's Intermezzo. I just yesterday finished my first Sally Rooney book. I have thoughts. I will talk about them at some point in time, but I read Normal People for the first time yesterday. So eventually I will probably get to Intermezzo. I don't think it'll be anytime soon because I'm going to want to read some of her other stuff before I get to the new stuff. What else? Oh, Blue Sisters, I have heard a lot about. Yeah, and that's literally it. I haven't actually read any of these, and the next category is actually historical fiction, so I probably have not read any of those either because I am not a historical fiction person. I just tend to I can't something about historical fiction, I have a really hard time like staying focused on it. Jodi Picoult has a book in here. I haven't heard from Jodi Picoult in a very long time. I have heard really wonderful things about James by Percival Everett. That one actually is on my TBR. And I think that might be it. Oh, you know what? Sylvia Moreno Garcia in general is on my TBR. So the Seventh Veil of Salome, I will probably get to at some point in time. Have not done so yet though. Mystery and romance is the next genre. Oh my god, I'm like literally, I'm a fraud. I've told you. Did I tell you yet? I've read 96 books this year. So far I haven't read any of these. So, mystery and thriller. Actually, okay, so I'm in a book club and they really like mysteries and thrillers. I haven't read any of them in a really long time, but the one that we are literally meeting on this week is First Lie Wins by Ashley Elson. Maybe I should actually read that this time. I've read some books by Lucy Foley before. They weren't my favorite, so I probably won't be reading The Midnight Feast. And I have read Frida McFadden before. I read one of her first books. I think it's called The Housemaid. I read that one. It was okay. It reminded me a lot of The Last Mrs. Parrish, which I have read really long time. I want to say it was like 2020 that I read The Last Mrs. Parrish, and The Housemaid was so similar for me that it kind of ruined it. And I literally have not read any other books in the mystery and thriller, but the next round is romance. I am a heavy romance reader, so I would assume I have read or at least heard of these books. Starting so strong. This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. It's starting strong. This list is starting strong. I know this is a fan favorite. I have not read This Could Be Us yet. And that's mainly because when This Could Be Us came out, I started with Kennedy Ryan's backlog and I read the Hook Shot, Long Shot um, series. And it was so very good. Devastating, though. It is emotionally devastating that I've needed to take a break from other Kennedy Ryan books before I could get back to it. And people have compared This Could Be Us not necessarily to that original, like, first series, but they did say that it's like emotional. So I, when I get back into a mood where I want a romance to hurt my feelings and then put me back together, I will be going to Kennedy Ryan. That just hasn't happened yet. So I promise it's on the list. Um, Other books that I am interested in or have read. I have read Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This one was interesting. Um, I didn't hate it. I didn't like it. It wasn't like my favorite. I was very engaged with it as I was reading it. I did like a tandem read with this one where I listened to the audiobook and I also read the digital copy and I had fun with it. I think I'm always surprised at how fun I find Ali Hazelwood books because none of them are like that serious. Um, but they are almost always a good time. And I think that um that kind of goes along with her other book that she has on this list, which is Not in Love. Very different vibe wise. That one is not a paranormal romance. I do love a paranormal romance though. And I do kind of love that a paranormal romance made this Goodreads list. I love that Ali Hazelwood did that for us. Not in Love wasn't my favorite. I think it's probably my least favorite Ali Hazelwood. But again, I still had a really good time with it. Some of the other names on this list, Carly Fortune, you will never catch me reading another Carly Fortune book. I hated this time last summer. I hated the one Carly Fortune book that I read. I will not be ever picking up another one of those books, but if you liked it, good for you. Abby Jimenez is someone I have not read anything from yet. I keep being told that I would really like their books. I just haven't picked them up yet. Something about them, like maybe I'm just saving them for like a rainy day. I'm not sure. I've heard absolutely wonderful things about How to End a Love Story. I hope to pick that up before the end of the year. Maybe now that I'm looking at it, maybe I'll bump that up my TBR. Swift and Saddled. I have read Swift and Saddled. I have read the I've read the entire series as it's been released so far up to Lost and Lassoed by Lila Sage. I don't like this series. Swift and Saddled was by far the best of this series. I just don't these books just like aren't really hitting for me. I went through a phase this summer where I was reading a bunch of like cowboy small town romances and I didn't enjoy the majority of them. But I did really like Swift and Saddled. And by really liked, I mean it was like a solid 3-star read for me. I had a good time. It wasn't great. It didn't do anything that I didn't expect it to do. It did exactly probably what I needed it to do in the moment. Mm. But every other book in that series, just like I really did not like. I really hated Lost and Lassoed. A Love Song for Ricky Wilde was really interesting. I loved the way that it incorporated magic into the romance. It did have like an Invisible Life of Addie LaRue vibe to it. And I really enjoyed it. I thought she did a really good job. I will definitely be reading more Tia Williams. I still have to read 7 Days in June. I just keep forgetting to read it in June. Christina Lauren is on here. I feel like that's a name that, like, no matter what they do, they're going to release a book and it's going to be on this list. Emily Henry is on here for Funny Story. Anytime Emily Henry releases a book, it's going to make these lists. I really, really enjoyed Funny Story. Um, I thought it was messy and funny, and it's quintessential Emily Henry. It's not my favorite Emily Henry book, but it is up there. It's probably number two, number three. I'm a beach read girly, so and then King of Sloth, I have not read that one, but I've read the other books in the Anna Huang series, or like I've just read others of her work, and I do really like them. I think out of this list, my vote is going to A Love Song for Ricky Wilde. I think it did a lot more than I was expecting it to. The found family that was within that one was just like really lovely. So let's move on to Romantasy. I am not a big Romantasy person, mainly because I feel like it's always a little rushed. Um, you've got Sarah J. Maas on here. You're not ever going to get rid of her on this list. If she releases a book, it's going to be on here. I have not read it, nor do I plan to. Gold is on here by Raven Kennedy, the Plated Prisoner series. I started this series and I abandoned it after book 3, I believe. It has gone on too long, and I will not be getting back into it. That's actually a series that's like been a pretty big letdown for me. I don't know what it is. Like, and I think this is also an issue I have with Romantasy series, is that they always seem like they're going to be planned out for like a 2 or 3 book series, and then all of a sudden they get extended and they're longer than they originally planned, and then the plot gets lost, and it's just really frustrating to read a series that feels like it's like meandering and doesn't really have a plan. So I stopped on that one. um I also stopped on Zodiac Academy. You cannot pay me to pick those books back up. That was No, that was horrible. I'm never reading those books again. Feybound, though, I did read and I did enjoy. The funny thing about Feybound is there were so many things about that book that I did really enjoy. There's so many characters. I love the relationship between the sisters in that story, and I loved all of the like found family. I loved the like world building. I loved the magic system. The only thing that I didn't like about Feybound was so each of the sisters in this story has their own like romance arc to it. And I didn't like the one sister's arc. I feel like it was rushed, and I feel like they didn't really build the momentum there. There wasn't really a foundation for this relationship to start in any way, shape, or form. Like they should have been enemies for multiple books in this series, and instead it just kind of felt rushed. But I will continue with that series because I did really enjoy the book. I think there's a lot um, left still to happen that I want to know about. I just, that, like, it's hard for me to find an enemies to lovers relationship that like I actually like anymore. I don't know. And I'm seeing a bunch of other books that I absolutely will not be reading. Oh my gosh, there's more Jennifer Armentrout on here of the same series, Born of Blood and Ash. I fear that Jennifer Armentrout will release a book in the series for every title she's able to find that is containing the words blood and ash. These titles are incredibly confusing. If you put them all together and asked me to pick which ones I've actually read out of that series, I don't think I'd be able to do it. They sound too familiar. Wow. Okay, yeah, so really the only book I've read on this list is Feybound, and it was a good one. Fantasy. Oh, okay. So I have read at least one of these books. I'm seeing An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson. I loved this one. This one was very, very fun. Again, I really liked the magic system. I liked the idea of like an academy for these gifted people that is like not student aged. Like our main character in this book was like, I want to say 24. So, like, right at the tail end of where you would normally get um, the age of an academy book, but this one is like the start of her journey. There were also older people in this academy. It wasn't age based really. um I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the magic system. The relationships I like sometimes rooted for and sometimes rooted against, but ultimately found myself happy with how things turned out. And one of the best things about this book is that it was a standalone. I love a standalone fantasy. I wouldn't be surprised if this book ended up having more books within a series that like explored maybe like a prequel to An Academy for Liars, or just like set in the same world as An Academy for Liars. But as this book stands, you could read this and have an entire experience and never have to pick up another book in that series. And I love that so much. That does not happen very often. Lee Bardugo's on here for The Familiar. I have not read it. I don't know if I will. I don't know. I feel like maybe she's just not an author for me. And yeah, that's it. That's it. Veronica Roth is on here for When Among Crows. I personally will never read Veronica Roth after the Divergent series. I have so many thoughts on the Divergent series. Reader's favorite science fiction. Okay, I don't think I've read any of the books in the science fiction category. I'm not a big science fiction reader, and the science fiction that I have read this year has been books from several years ago. Um, like the Murderbot Diaries I read this year. I read some Becky Chambers this year. Nothing new this year, so I'm not surprised that I haven't read anything on this list. Same with the horror list. I have not read any like new releases really for horror, but I'm seeing Stephen Graham Jones in this list for I Was a Teenage Slasher. I have his books literally on my TBR cart downstairs. I still need to read My Heart is a Chainsaw. Um, what else is on here? T. Kingfisher is on here. I've heard really good things about. Stephen Graham Jones is on here twice. Good for him. Gabino Iglesias, House of Bones and Rain. Just in general, his books are on my TBR. I just haven't gotten there yet. So Thirsty is also I like downloaded the audiobook for this one and I just haven't made it to that one yet. I was hoping to get to it for spooky season and did not read it for October, but there's still time. Oh my gosh, and I still have to read Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. I really liked his last traditionally published book. So Bury Your Gaze is definitely on my TBR. I need to get to that one. Maybe I'll borrow it from the library today. Okay, debut novels. I did like a I did a quick glance at the debut novels category earlier today, and I already know that I have not read any of these books. Um, but I think this is like a really interesting category. One of the books that I do have on my TBR from this list, actually two of them. Okay, the first one is The Truth According to Ember. I really want to get to this one. And then also How to End a Love Story. This was also nominated in the romance category. I've heard really good things about both of those. Martyr was also nominated earlier. The debut category, again, is really interesting because a book can be nominated for another category, like a genre category, and in addition to a debut author category, and they can also be nominated for audiobook. So, audiobook and debut can be nominated elsewhere. Favorite audiobooks. First Sly Wins is on here, so maybe my book club book should be an audiobook. Oh, Percival Everett's James is also on here, so maybe I'll do that one as an audiobook as well. Emily Henry's Funny Story is on here. I actually did listen to that one as an audiobook and I really enjoyed it. Abby Jimenez is also on this list too. Same with Sally Rooney. Okay, the audiobook category has a lot of um, books that have been nominated in other categories. The next category is Young Adult Fantasy. I have not read, I don't think, any young adult fantasy books. I'm very behind just in general on young adult fantasy. I've heard a lot about Air by Saba Tahir, but I have not read it. And obviously, I've heard a lot about Ruthless Vows, have not read it. The Poisons We Drink, I've also heard a lot about, have not read it. Brandon Sanderson's on here. I feel like that's always going to be the case. And then young adult fiction. Have I read any of these? Oh, I've read Most Ardently. I thought it was okay. I thought as a book, it was good. It was enjoyable. As a Pride and Prejudice retelling, it was not my favorite. It um very quickly establishes the Wickham character as bad, as evil, as a character you don't want to root for. And I just really don't enjoy when Pride and Prejudice retellings give that away so quickly. I think it takes away from like the Lydia character. Um, and it kind of also takes away from like the initial miscommunication and like why there's conflict in the beginning. I feel like Wickham is like the pivotal character to that entire storyline hinges upon. So not my favorite Pride and Prejudice retelling, definitely, but I did still think it was an enjoyable read. It was a very good YA historical romance. I just didn't like it as a Pride and Prejudice retelling. And the other book that I have on my TBR from this list is Where Sleeping Girls Lie. I loved Ace of Spades. It was one of the last books that I read of 2023, and it was 5 stars for me. This book is on my TBR. Maybe I'll read it in December. Keep it as one of my like end of the year authors, like so that I know that I'm ending the year on a high note. Okay, so the next genre is nonfiction. So I had a reading goal this year to read at least 12 nonfiction books, and I have read 11 so far. Um, that's pretty big for me. I do have One in a Millennial on my TBR. I actually have the physical copy by Kate Kennedy. Some of my best friends are big Kate Kennedy stans. Um, so that one's definitely on my list. I just haven't gotten to it yet. Oh, okay. And then The Message by Ta-Nehisi Coates, I actually just finished a couple days ago. I did the audiobook for this one. It was wonderful. He is the one who narrates it, so I definitely recommend the audiobook experience, because if you can have Ta-Nehisi Coates tell you the message in his own voice, I think you should definitely take that opportunity. The next category is memoir. I haven't read a ton of memoirs this year, but the one that I have read is The Third Gilmore Girl by Kelly Bishop. I actually just borrowed this one from the library. I didn't listen to this one on audiobook because that was not yet available in my library, but I have heard that the audiobook is really phenomenal. I would have liked to listen to that one. I thought this one was okay. It felt very like timeline detailed, um, and kind of, I don't know, I feel like I wanted a little bit more depth from it. But at the same time, I think it was an enjoyable read. She talks a lot about her pets in this story, and in the end, you do get to see photos of her pets, so that was lovely. And another book that I did read out of this list is There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension by Hanif Abdurraqib. I really enjoyed this one. I'm a little biased, I will say, because I am from Ohio and so is he. And this is very much kind of an ode to basketball and Ohio. And you definitely don't need to know about either of those things to enjoy this book. But for me personally, this was personal. Okay, and then the last category is history and biography. I have not read any of these books. That is definitely not my nonfiction category that I gravitate towards. But I have seen the bookshop pop up quite a bit. I don't think I'll get to it. That is all of the books nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards. This is the opening round. Like I said, you have until the 24th to vote in the opening round. So there are no rules in like how to vote for the Goodreads Choice Awards. You can do whatever you feel is right. For me personally, my general rule is that if I've read a book in a category that's been nominated, if I gave it 5 stars, I will vote for it. And if there's multiple books that I've given 5 stars, I will vote for the book that is from a marginalized author or an indie author over another 5 star read. So that leaves me with these books as my nominations. I would love to know how you are voting this year, what you're voting for, and I would also love to know like what books you would have liked to see on this list. I feel like there's that could have been like a whole other video of books that I wanted to see on this list but didn't. I have some time off of work coming up here, so I'm hoping to be able to make a couple more videos in the next few weeks, months. We'll see. Maybe I'll get more consistent with this. Maybe I won't. We'll never know. But if you're still here watching this with me, thank you so much for being here today. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful day. Mwah.